Hello, everyone. You are listening to the C Squared podcast with Corey and Curtis. Today, we don't have just one guest, but we have two from Napalm Records. We have Natalie, head of PR, and Bram, marketing manager. And they've both agreed to join us today, but they came in a pair because they know it's all about the shenanigans on this podcast. But first, before we get started, I do just want to say thank you both for joining us today. We're super excited to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Cool. So for the very first question, we just want to get a nutshell version on both your backgrounds. So I guess we'll start with Natalie first, and then we'll go over to Bram.
It might actually make a little more sense to start with Natalie because, with Bram instead of Natalie. I can't talk today. All right, podcast over. Because my first real job outside of college, I'll start actually at college. College radio is really what got me into this. I love metal. I love my radio station, my tiny 10-watt radio station in Pennsylvania. And it led me to an internship at a trade magazine, Friday Morning Quarterback. I was there for a long time. Then I went to Billboard and worked at Billboard for a little while. Billboard Radio Monitor was a trade magazine. And after that, I worked at a company called The Syndicate, which is a marketing company. And I handled metal radio there. And one of the people I spoke to was Natalie. I promoted records to her back when she was still in college.
19 years old.
Yeah, so we've known each other for quite a while. I was at The Syndicate for a little while. I ran a website called Metal Insider, which you're probably familiar with. I also did metal radio promotion. I did some experiential events and marketing events with companies like HBO and Showtime. And then I got the opportunity to join Napalm. And I've known the label and I've known some of the people there and I liked a lot of the bands. And I've been here for about 3 years. So that's my career in a nutshell. But yeah, I spoke to her when she was in college.
Yeah, that was
a long time ago.
There's crossover. That's what we're like. It was funny actually when I found out I was going to be working with Bram. I was like, I got my start in college radio, like a lot of industry people do, especially in the metal side of things. And so I was working with Bram, and I was working with a lot of promoters and radio promo people at different labels and such. And I was doing internships at like Relapse, and I was like the first Metal Sucks intern, and I did Metal Insider stuff and all kinds of stuff. And then I started working at Adrenaline PR, which is the firm that's led by Maria Ferrero, who's like a PR legend. And I worked there for 10 years and worked with everyone from like Lamb of God to Motorhead and Ronnie James Dio and Mayhem Festival and like pretty much like the biggest names in the game at the time. And I think 2 years ago now, a little bit over 2 years ago, the opportunity here came up at Napalm, and I took it, and I was excited to work with Bram and excited to work with Sean and Logan and everybody on the team overseas, and it's been doing that since, and it's been great. That's my story.
Good job.
And since, you just kind of touched on it a little bit, segued into it a little bit, do you both want to kind of go over what your roles are at Napalm and what they all entail? And we could, since Bram went first last time, you can go first this time, Natalie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, fairness. I do PR, and I know I've listened to the podcast. I know you guys have talked to some different people about PR topics and such, but the main role is as a publicist, outside of being manager, is just I'm a publicist, and it's different than some. I know there are some labels that set it up differently, where like sometimes the person managing PR is actually doing the hands-on PR. Otherwise, sometimes they're managing different indies and such. But here, I do actual PR every day and promote bands, obviously, like general PR would, with interviews and different, all kinds of different opportunities, TV, magazines, online, that whole business. And then on top of that, I'm also, managing the department here. So I work with John Freeman, does a lot of our PR here for most of our bands. And then we've got a couple other independents that we work with, and pretty much just oversee, what they're doing and work with them as a team to make sure that the bands are getting the most opportunities that they can and opportunities that make sense. And aside from that, it's all the good clerical stuff that comes with being publicist. But at Napalm here, we're very like team oriented. So it's not just like me doing my own job and then everyone else is doing their own job. Like we all communicate all day long, interdepartment. And so a lot of times I think I'm doing things that also might not even fall under PR because we're all working together on different ideas and brainstorming and things. So I don't know if that was a really like convoluted answer to your question, but yeah, and working with the team overseas too, and bridging the European gap. I work with the European team to communicate on our projects all the time, and run lead on all the North American bands. There you go. That's
Yeah, I mean the whole like we're one team is part of why we're doing this podcast together.
Yeah.
I mean, we really do all talk to each other all the time. We're in the same office talking to each other or on Slack, talking to the European team. We have an Austrian office and a Berlin office, so a lot of overlap. Essentially, when I got hired by Sean Quinn, who's the North American label manager, he'd known me for a long time, and he knew that I knew radio because I'd done it at the Syndicate and I'd overseen it at Friday Morning Quarterback as well. So he knew I would have some of those contacts, and he knew from Metal Insider that I knew advertising. So essentially, a lot of what I do is oversee radio and oversee all the print and digital advertising. I don't necessarily call every single station because there's active rock and there's metal, but Muncie, who I'm sure everyone in the music industry knows, is one of the main radio people. We've had him on retainer since before I was at the label. I think he's been doing it for years actually.
He's a legend.
For the label.
Yeah.
And we also hire sometimes on some of our bigger, more high-profile projects, the Syndicate as well. My former coworkers and radio. I don't like active rock radio is a whole separate beast. So we have different people we work with for campaigns on that. So that's that. I oversee again placing print and digital advertising in North America, and various other things like sound exchange, collection, and getting everything submitted into that. Amazon advertising. And again, like many different
hats.
Many different things that don't always have to do with either of those. Because sometimes, for example, like one of our artists 2 weeks ago, their Facebook got hacked and they couldn't get into it. And I know someone who works with Facebook, and I just happened to be like, hey, can you get this taken care of? And it wasn't super easy, but I was able to get it done more than, trying to talk to whoever at Facebook handles that. So,
yeah. Totally.
Sorry if you're hearing like planes and trains and automobiles. By the way, we're right outside New York, so there's a lot of transportation going on. It's loud here, so just want to make sure. Anyway.
So I had a follow-up question just on that before we go to our next one. Just I guess it's for Bram. How much focus do you guys put on radio then versus print and online? Like a lot?
I wouldn't say it's a versus. It's kind of like they're all their own separate beasts, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's like if you have a band like Alter Bridge, you have to go to rock radio, and people are going to want to hear what there's fans of his at that, and they'll respond to that more necessarily. Maybe not more than they will a print ad, but it's very necessary. And there's some bands. We have a lot of obviously we have a lot of power metal bands on our label, and knowing that there's 20 stations that play a ton of power metal on their metal shows, we'll know that that's a priority for that. It really kind of depends on the act.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's kind of the same as with PR, is like you're identifying like which opportunities make sense and which outlets make sense for the different artists. Like if you're just going cookie cutter and you're hitting everybody all in one swing, like you're not really doing the maximum that you can. So it's, every band is getting the opportunity to be discussed for radio. It just depends on, right?
Yeah, it's also picking and choosing, especially also with advertising. There's only a few outlets that put out regular magazines that cover metal. So, but we're not going to put like a scene band in Decibel, just like we're not going to put a death metal band in Revolver or whatever. So it's really about picking and choosing and trying to figure out what's best for one artist, whether it's radio or advertising.
Cool. So that kind of leads into the next question about marketing intertwining with the PR, if you guys can explain that a little bit.
I mean, it's kind of church and state in terms of if you book an ad in a magazine, if I do that, I know that Natalie's going to be following up, but it's not ethical really for her to be like, hey, we bought an ad. How about you cover us?
Yeah.
It's hopefully inferred that they'll want to, whether we buy an ad or not. But
or inferred that it'd be cool if they did.
But we talk about stuff like that all the time because there is some, a lot of crossover.
Right. I try like just from my own approach, I try not to rely on, that sort of who's advertising with what, like I previously, working in independent, like the advertising aspects didn't even come into play for me because I was just like, I'm doing my job and I'm getting it done regardless of who's spending money on what. So I've kind of continued that mindset because I think even if you're not advertising, obviously, like people are going to want to cover things, and just because you are advertising doesn't mean that they're going to cover you based on bandwidth or whatever their own personal interests are. So I actually, you said church and state, I kind of, I will, sometimes it actually works the other way around. I know I lost my ability to speak there. Sometimes it works the other way around where I'll be like, I know this magazine is going to be covering band A, B, and C. So, but not band D. So maybe it makes sense for us to put an ad in for band D so that we can still get that release in front of the readers without the editorial coming through, or like the opposite, which is we should advertise all those bands because the outlet is supporting all those bands and so on and so forth. So we do talk on that. We have meetings regularly about this kind of stuff. So.
It also goes like the same for online. If there's a website that we know loves the band, of course we're going to advertise that release on there. If there's a band that sounds like or is aligned with a sound that they cover, we're going to want to advertise, even if they're not that familiar with that band. Maybe it'll make them listen. Maybe their fans will click through. Maybe their fans already heard it on Spotify because it came up as a recommended artist to the artist they like. And if they see an ad, they'll click on it. I mean, obviously nothing's guaranteed, but we definitely strategize about that when looking at booking advertising for our online outlets that we work with.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, and speaking of crossover, this question's kind of for Natalie, but there's probably some aspects that cross over with you too, Bram, is when you're managing and running PR in North America, how do you kind of deal with the potential overlap with the EU? Like, how do you keep them separate? Because there's so much writer overlap between all the different publications, and somebody who's in the UK might write for a US publication and vice versa. So how do you navigate that realm to keep things separate?
So, like for an example, like you said, there's writers that are here that also write for like Metal Hammer, or there'll be people like Carl at Brave Words who are overseas, but they write for a Canadian like website. It's you basically, the way we work it out is whichever publication that they're writing the thing for. So if it's, he might come to me and say, oh, I'm doing or somebody might come to me and say, I need to do a piece for Kerrang or for Rock Hard or one of these things. And if that's the case, I would connect them with the European rep. So each artist we have, we assign a US or North American based person, which is me/John, or me or John, or the other, or another independent, and a European lead. So we'll basically just bounce that back and forth. So like if it's somebody that would come to me, like I said, for a European publication, I would say like Lucas or Lisa or Hakan, like this person, I want to introduce this person. They told me that they're interested in covering this for this magazine, and vice versa. Like they'll send me people, or if I get pitched by a foreign publication, we'll just trade it off and make sure that our lists are separate as well. So like if I won't have any UK or European people on our list, and they'll go on theirs. And if there's any crossover, we'll decide, whether it makes sense to keep that person on. But that overlap doesn't tend to cause any problems because we figure it out like right away. Prior to working here, I, again, like as an independent, you kind of end up dealing with publications that aren't always in your territory. Sometimes if it makes sense and you have the connection, you might as well do it, right? So I was dealing with Kerrang and Metal Hammer and all that before. But so it's kind of nice that we're able to break it up now. And hopefully that answered your question.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it also helps with like the language issues, because being an independent PR, like that's what we do for part of what we do, and working with people in like France, it's definitely it gets a little interesting.
Yeah. Luckily, prior to here, I really was only maybe there were a couple of South American publications and some people in the UK that I would deal with, but rarely did I run into that where it was something in an actual European country. And if I did, I would forward it back to the client, or they would handle it. But now, like we have, so like I said, we have European leads here, but we also have a lot of different independents in Europe and in the UK. So we have people that we hire in the UK and in France and different territories. Australia, we have people that work in each one that are led by us internally. So there's always a person to send something to. So if I get something random from Australia, I'll be like, pass this on to Chris or whoever's handling it.
Makes sense. Just back for a second, I had a follow-up question from an earlier thing that you said earlier, Natalie, which was just about the aspect of advertising and PR. Can you kind of go over like how you kind of pick and choose based upon the ad a little bit, and in a little bit more detail, like how you will kind of pitch them at that point? Like if like you guys are running an ad type thing with it being.
I usually don't bring it up at all. I feel, I don't bring it up at all. I personally feel like that's kind of like, you should cover this because we paid you. I don't believe in that. And I mean, I know that works for a lot of different people, but I just as a publicist, I'm not saying this is how it should be overall. I'm just saying just my own standpoint on that is that they should want to cover this based on it being a good product and a good artist alone. And the advertising is to represent our roster and to represent us as a label and to represent what we have coming out. But I as a publicist should be able to get that done. Regardless of whether money is being paid. And if I can't get that done, it's not based on the job that I've done or the money that was spent or not spent. It's just because they are not interested in the artist. There's not enough space. I've never run into an issue where I felt like people were only covering something because they were being paid. And I've never run into an issue where I had to say something like that. I just don't feel right bringing money into it. Unless I really had to.
And if we're placing an ad somewhere, it's because we think that it's a good fit for that readership or viewership. Not necessarily like, hey, cover this. It's like,
exactly.
Hey, you might be interested in this. Like, you know, whether the magazine's covered it or not. And if they have in the past, then that's all the more reason for people to see that band's name one more time, even if it's not being covered, you know, in whatever month's magazine that is, or, you know, that news cycle.
And I don't think that they pick and choose which art, like, I don't think they pick and choose which artists based on the artists that we're advertising either. I think it's kind of more like, we as Napalm are advertising our current releases to you, like, as a whole, you know, right? Like,
Makes sense. Just before Corey's follow-up question, I just wanted to say, I think also as well, like, I mean, if they're covering your artists, you're going to be wanting to pay for ads as a result. So I would think, you know what I mean? So it would seem to make sense what you're saying anyways, right? So.
yeah, I mean, I think it's all a big relationship. I think we all, you know, I think publicists, it's really important for us to look at, you know, this is a community that where we all support each other and we all have, you know, relationships with each other. And those are some of the best relationships that I have with publications, are people that I feel like I can be like, hey, look, I know you can't cover everything this month, but these are the things I really feel strongly appeal to your readership. And if you had to select like 2 or 3, like, I mean, we have to get down to it. And there's an understanding there, a mutual understanding and respect for the work, like for what we're all doing and for supporting the scene and as a whole. So
Totally. Corey?
So one thing I wanted to touch on, which is kind of the whole reason we do this podcast, is giving the younger bands and the newer bands who don't have label support and things like that a bit of industry insider tips and tricks. And so for each of you, when it comes to PR or when it comes to marketing, what are some things that bands could do on their own to better represent themselves as they're getting going in their career? We can start with you, Natalie, on PR. Like, what are some ways that bands can avoid the pitfalls that, you know, the trial and error pitfalls that bands fall into, and some tricks they can employ as they grow in their career and then hopefully get to the point where they can get a label?
I guess I'll look at it from the perspective of like what we look for and what to avoid. So in order to, because I think a lot of bands measure success in being signed or being, you know, getting to that level. So, I mean, having your social media not look terrible is always a good thing. I mean, hopefully this is the question you're asking. If it's not, let me know. But okay, like really making sure that your like public facing persona and your public facing brand is the best that it can be. So, you know, really great photos, making sure that you have contact information out there, really trying to work your community to build your following before it hits the attention of a label. Because usually, like when we're looking at bands, like these are some of the first things that we look at when we're considering, you know, what to do is what following does the band already have? How are they representing themselves? Like, what does their music sound like? Is it good? Is it a good fit for us? Do we think it'll appeal to the people that we push to, like things like that? But one of the big things I think that a lot of young bands do that gets in their way is they get an ego before they even get started. And I think it's important to stay humble and to hustle and to know that like you're just a part of this big wheel. And if you make it, awesome. If you don't, it doesn't mean that you're like you didn't try hard enough or that you don't matter. It's like sometimes it's luck. Sometimes it's because you're that good. Like, but I would say the one pitfall to avoid if I had to name one would be stay humble, like and hustle. Don't stop.
I think hustle is really the key to everything. I mean, I'm also gonna have played in bands, and I'm in a band now, and I love promoting. Like, if I believe in something, aka my music, I want people to know about it. And if it sounds as good as it can, and you're out there promoting every show, that's going to lead to people in the community caring about you, and maybe people beyond the community caring about you. And you build up that currency as a musician or as a band, then labels will come to you before you go to them.
Yeah.
You know, and going back to what Natalie said about social media, you know, there's a lot of bands that have put out like 2 or 3 independent albums before signing with us, and they're almost fully formed by the time they sign. And it's up to us to take them to the next level. And if there's a band that's serious enough about themselves to do that, then we're going to care that much more about promoting them.
Yeah. Just had a thought. Oh, a question that comes up a lot with PR and bands in relation to PR that I'll answer, even though it wasn't asked, but it's related to this. A lot of times people say, like, should independent bands hire PR? And my answer would be yes, as long as you make sure that you have something to promote, something that's worth promoting, an album, and all of the stuff that's ready. You can't just hire somebody to send out a press release. I mean, you could, but like, I mean, it really, there needs to be steam. And the reason I say this is because when we get, and this is related to the question, I promise, when we get these things, these bands that we're looking at, a lot of times I'll be like, oh wow, they have like press, like they actually already have press, like people know who they are, and that's going to be a swift introduction for me, because I can be like, oh, you've actually already covered this band, or you premiered a video from them, or whatever. Like it really does add a level of clout to them before they even get to us, and you can achieve that by hiring an independent publicist at some point. Like we just signed a band that we're releasing a record from this fall. They came in with a press kit that I was like, oh, like, because their prior like smaller label that I never heard of this label, but they had PR and they like killed it. I was like, oh, okay, I have my work cut out for me. Cool.
Yeah, it's also the same with radio to a degree. I mean, I'm answering not necessarily as Napalm's radio person, but as someone that did metal radio for years at the Syndicate. You know, there's labels that are like, hey, we put out a really good record, hire us and get us famous. And it's like, we'll do our part, but if you have nothing else going on, if you're not touring, if you don't have any publicity at all, it's probably not worth it, because people will play stuff based on passion and liking the record, but unless there's something going on, that's going to go away in a couple of weeks. So I think it's basically radio and publicity and whatever else. It's like a cornerstone to help and build your band into what you want them to be. And if you want to get to a label and get signed as a result of that, it's important. And maybe you don't. Maybe you just want to have your shit together as a band and do it yourself. But unless you have like more than one thing going on, whether it's a video, publicity, radio campaign, touring, if you have all those, you're in a pretty solid spot to get out in front of people. But without those, you're kind of a little bit of a disadvantage.
And then I have just a quick follow-up. Natalie, you said have something worth promoting, an album. How do you, because we get a lot of requests for singles, like just one singles. How do you feel about doing press for just one-off singles versus an album? So
I'm going to look at it from what I feel yields success, and that and in a press and success in a press capacity is also like a very broad term, because getting press versus getting just getting bands recognition is like a success in some cases, especially with a small band. But I always found when I was working independent that when a band had an album, it gave us a timeline to work with. It gave us multiple assets to work with. It gave us time to build them and pitch them and like get them in there. Whereas like if you're you can service a single and there will be people that post about it, but I would find that by the end of a full album campaign, I would have a lot more people on board, and it was worth the investment that the band put in for the extra few $1,000s, because we were able to really like keep them going and keep them in the minds with multiple assets and things. That one single, I mean, you can drop that, but I mean, and you might get some press on it. If you get a premiere with it, then of course you're going to get an automatic piece of press out of that, which might actually cannibalize your other opportunities. But if you're just working a single, like it's more of an introduction. Like you're putting that artist and that music in front of people and saying like, hey, please cover this, but otherwise, like, please just take note of this band, listen to this, get to know them, whatever. The album campaign automatically adds follow-up to that. And like consistent months of pushing. That's why I always feel that way. I just feel like the more effort we can put into it, the better you're gonna get. So if it's $300 versus $2,000, you know, it's like, or however much you might be worth it for you to put more into it.
Also, as someone that ran a metal website and also likes music, I mean, if I hear a good single, I'm gonna be like, cool, what else you got? And if there's nothing else, it's a little bit limiting.
Yeah, like if I know an album's coming, like as someone that's on the receiving end of it, it's like the album itself gives it clout, like gives it like, because I mean, any local band can be like, I'm putting out a video that we spend tons of money on, and then it's like over. And it's like, all right, but like, do you have what it takes to put out an actual like release? Like, do you have, and if you're just dropping a single, then it's okay. Now, if you're somebody, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if you're somebody that's like dropping repeated singles over the course of an extended period of time, then that might
Lil Nas X.
Yeah, right. Lil Nas X. It might be different in that regard, because you're getting people where like that. There have been bands that have been doing that lately that have, it's really been working for them, but they've also, a lot of those bands have been signed. They've had big marketing teams, big management behind them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of power. If you're just an independent band and you're just going to a publicist every 5 months with a single, sure, that name is going to keep being repeated in front of those press people, and they'll start to remember your name. That's good. But unless you, I mean, I feel like I said before, it's community, it's a team. Like unless you have that whole backing, without the album, it might be a little not as quick results as you're expecting. And that's something I know you guys probably deal with in PR. I mean, I dealt with it too, where they wanted results like immediately. And it's like, well, this is a process. Like it's a process. There's introducing you, and then there's building you, and then once people know you, then we're going to be able to see that like instant feedback.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the only really good singles campaign that I've ever seen is from an artist, Ludovico Technique. They drop one every single month. So that's,
well, who is it? I missed it.
Ludovico Technique. They're an industrial band, and they drop one every single month, a new single. Sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's not a video, but without the consistency to back it up, like dropping one, like you said, every 5 months, people are going to forget you in the 4 months and 29 days in between.
Right. I think a recent example would be Spirit Box.
Yep. I was gonna be like, go.
like a year ago, they put out a single, then they put another one out like 6 months ago, and it all led up to the album. And by then, they had a gigantic fan base.
And these bands are probably great. I mean, they would not be. I mean, Spirit Box is great. Like, I haven't heard the other band, but like they wouldn't be able to have the success if the music wasn't doing something right. Like if they weren't doing something right. But that's the thing, is if you are going to drop singles like that, you have to have, there's got to be something else. Like you can't just be like Joe on the street dropping singles every month and start to see success. There's something else there. There's some sort of push. There's money. There's previous work that you've done. Like I feel like there's usually something.
There's a foundation that's been built. It's not something that anybody can just be like, oh, here's 10 singles that I'm going to release over the next 10 months.
Right.
No foundation at all.
Like, I don't think any like local Joe band who's never put out anything could look at Spirit Box and be like, oh, well, they did that, so we can do this too. No, I mean, Spirit Box, they've been hustling for years. They've been in other bands. Like they've honed their sound. They've worked it into a modern, and very like tasteful and addictive and accessible thing that works for them. And there's so many different parts of that machine that are working for them, and ultimately the music rocks though. And that's
I think a recent example for us would be Tetrarch, because we signed them.
By the way,
yeah,
those guys, I call them modern nostalgia, because they are every band from my middle school and high school era wrapped into one. Sorry, I just fangirled out there.
No, I love that. That's great.
But they're an example of a band, like already had, like, they'd hired people for radio. There was enough of a buzz about them, they were going to play on Sirius XM. So we signed them when they were already working their first single, and kind of picked up and ran with it from there. And, it's pretty exciting to see them go on tour for the first time next month with Atreyu. And they're one of those bands that, again, like, kind of had their stuff together enough, and was well known enough and did enough to get noticed by not just us. There were other labels looking at them for them to sign with us. So,
I mean, I worked with them before too.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it was always obvious that they had something going for them, and that's the thing I love. Like, I'm not going to name the name because we haven't announced that the record's coming up when we sign them, but we have another band that's putting out something in early Q1 that it's like you kind of just know, like, based on that, like, modernized sound and like their own savvy. Like, I mean, that's a big thing, and I'll segue into that even though you didn't ask, but I think it's worth talking about on this topic of what bands can do to propel themselves. Like, that I'm excited about, because I just know, I feel it. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be awesome. Like, people are gonna love this, and I feel that way about, like, Tetrarch, Spirit Box, like some of these bands where you just know, you feel it. You know, it's like so good that like it's undeniable, like how good this is, and how much they get it. And that's the thing that I was gonna say, is like, getting it isn't even musical, like, completely. It's like some of these bands, like, they're making their own content, like, they're out there, like you said, like, hustling. They have their own, like, video studio setups, like Vicky, like Sumo Cycle, like, they make their own music videos in their house, like, they and their music videos are crazy, and they've been doing DIY for years, so they got that ready, and their ability to not just create that content, like music video stuff, but like create their own, like, be available to create content and be like self-media trained and be like just get it. Like, they just get it. Like, Vicky from The Agonist is, I mean, I'm working with her now. We just put on a new EP from them. It's awesome. She's like on it. Like, she has a Twitch channel. She has her own studio set up at home where she's doing a bunch of vocal stuff. And I pitch her to people. I'm like, if you need somebody like quick that gets it, that's going to give you quality and isn't going to mess around and waste your time, like, she's someone. I'll put Brittany from Unleash the Archer, the same thing. Like, she has her own setup at home. She's amazing in interviews. She's super easy to work with. And it's like, if you just teach yourself how to become accessible in that way, not just as an artist, but like as in a communication sense, and build yourself as a personality and not just as I get on stage and play guitar. I mean, it really helps. And I'm sure you guys see it too, like with press people too. It's like, you know which artists are going to be easy to get that quick turnaround from. And those publications, like, they look for that. They're like, do you have anybody that can just do a live interview? Like on Thursday night, I had somebody drop, and I'll start to think of the people that I actually feel like might be able to like get on it. And it's really useful. So be that.
Yeah.
Well, we'll bring you home.
I said, be flexible and easy to work with.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I mean, some bands can't. Some bands don't have that ability though, and that's okay. Like, you know, if you can't. Let me like edit that a little bit. Some bands don't have the ability to have a special space for their own video studio. Like, some bands don't have the backing to be able to set that up. But you know, you make do where you can. I just think that's helpful. If you have the means to do it and you have the savvy to do it, there should be nothing stopping you. You know?
Yeah. And I don't think you have to have like an expensive setup or any of that stuff to be both flexible and you know, get along with people. It goes so far being just nice.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'll use Brittany as an example. Like, she's just so pleasant and easy to interview, and like, she knows how to, like I said, media training. Like, she knows how to answer a question in the way that she wants it to be portrayed. And like, I mean, people, you know, the big PR no, people, you know, publications contact her directly all the time, and she's one of the only people that I'm like, I fully trust her to do whatever she needs to do, because you know, it's people like that. It's very easy to work with. I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
I got nothing. I agree with Natalie.
I'll go on forever.
So we only got about 7 minutes or 10 minutes left, but
Okay.
I got one more question. I don't know if Corey has one more, but this is geared towards Natalie. So can you talk about
Sorry.
the difference between breaking a new band, like doing PR for a newer band versus like one that's established? Because a lot of bands think just because their publicist has worked with a big band, for example, they can get in all the same spot. Can you kind of cover that?
Yes, I just was having this conversation with the band recently, where I basically said, like, you can rest assured that we're going to get you in front of the right people and that we're going to push you the way that we would know to push. Because between John and I, John Freeman and I, like, we both have over 10, 12 years already, like, just working metal specialty, like completely metal rock specialty, and some of the biggest bands like in the game and some of the smallest, like, you know, like with all the upcoming stuff. So we know how it works in all directions. And I assured them, I'm like, the job is going to be done in the way that it needs to be done, but you might not see this like waterfall of press right away because we have to build you. We have to get you, we have to build the relationship between you and the media. So we have to introduce you to them, get them to listen to your music, get them to understand what makes you special. And that doesn't happen overnight unless there's like some other like weird circumstance that like you got 1 million YouTube views overnight for some reason. Even that doesn't happen without anything else. So it's, you know, I have to tell them, like, you might not see it right away. This is going to be an introductory campaign, and we're going to be introducing you to people on this one, and we'll get some good hits, we'll get some good quotes, we'll get some clips that we can use in the future and that you can put on your wall and be proud of. But I mean, you might not be like in every magazine like right away. Like even Tetrarch, like, you know, we saw some great, I worked them prior, like I said, we saw great reception for them. And this time around we blanketed. I mean, they were everywhere and it was really great. But having that, yeah, like having that prior campaign, like was the jumping off point, like for them, having that basis of press and recognition with the media. So, yeah, I now, and I'm going to just say a lot of the stuff that I'm saying here, it really applies to North America. Mm-hmm. Like I'm speaking very specifically to how press does not work the same. Advertising does not work the same in all the territories. So I do, like I said, I want to just clarify that everything I'm saying is relevant to what I believe makes sense for North American press and the press climate here. I can't represent necessarily what they're doing in Europe and how those relationships work there. So you'd have to have a European person for me. Hold on. Hint, hint, if you want to get how it works over there.
Fair. Corey, did you have a follow-up on that before I ask my final?
I am good on my end. You asked your final.
My final question. So one last question just about, so Natalie, what do you do when, or Bram, both of you guys, what do you guys do like if the campaign just bombs, nothing's going well? What happens in that case? This
will be the question that I give you. Just kidding.
Yeah,
like,
that's for sure.
Give me the cool question. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we put out 71 releases this year, so not everything is going to take off the way we want it to. But
I think it's fine.
Sometimes you'll just try to focus on the people that do like whatever that is.
Yeah.
Whatever the album is, find those fans, find the people that supported it, and really just kind of bookmark them for the next album that band puts out. A lot of, especially with radio, a lot of these bands don't necessarily have like high goals. Some are surprised they're even on any radio at all. So, and I'm generally, for the most part, not dealing with the bands directly. I talk to our product managers and send them the reports. So it's really up to them to deliver the good or bad news to whoever. I do deal with management sometimes, and some artists are very hands-on, so they want to know everything. And you want to be as blunt as possible. It's like, hey, this isn't breaking through the way that we hope it would. But hopefully that doesn't happen because everything we put out is a hit.
Yeah. No, I mean, we truly do. I mean, we truly do believe like everything we put out, you know, we believe it's like, it's awesome in its own right, regardless of the sound or the image or whatever, you know, but when something doesn't go well, like on top of that, we kind of have to step back and kind of assess, like, why didn't this work? Like, what about this, like whether it be the videos or whether it be the music itself or in the music in comparison to the prior release and like how that sounded, or were they on tour, were they not on tour? Like we have to look at kind of all these elements and be like, is it, you know, was it something to do with us or was it to do with something about the product itself, like the music or the artist? And you just kind of, you assess what didn't work. And then you just keep that in mind and try to kind of either combat that and make up for it or think about it the next time. So if we feel like the music was the reason that it didn't do because it didn't match the sound of the prior album, we'll eventually say something to the artist or management and be like, hey, no, like after going through everything, you know, we feel like this is what, I'm assuming that this conversation is being had, but I mean, that's what I would do. I would say, like, you know, I think this might be what it was, and just let them know for the future and keep that in mind. If they choose to act on that, then that's them. They're the artists. They do what they want to do artistically. So,
yeah,
Fair
I mean, at Metal Radio and to a degree at the outlets we advertise with, sometimes there's some music that we put out that falls in between the cracks. Like it's, you know, not heavy enough for some people, but too heavy for others, or too experimental. And we try to go into whatever project that is with the expectations that this might not be a really big radio band, but press is going to do really well.
right, like, okay, this is the, like Sean always says, this is the driver, like this department is the driver for this, because we know that this is going to do well. Like, so I'll use Sumo Cycle as an example. They're super engaged on Instagram and social media. And so we knew like their socials are going to drive like this to their fans, as opposed to press, which was really great. We did have radio success. We ended up having success in all areas with that release. It was really great. But we knew that like they really had such strong fan engagement, that you know, we were able to pinpoint where that's, you know.
Well, for an example, sometimes we'll get like a black metal band that curses on every song on the album, and they're not expecting to get played on radio, and they probably don't care if they are. It would probably dilute their image of themselves or whatever. But when someone's like, I can't play this, there's curses on every song on the album except for this one, and it's an instrumental interlude. You know, I think they know going in that they're not necessarily going to get that success.
And it's the same with press, where it's, you know, I said it before, like you can't take a cookie cutter approach to music PR. You can't, you will fail. Like you basically have to say like, okay, this is the type of band this is. So I think that they'll fit in these types of publications. You can try to pitch them to the other ones, because a lot of times those all the outlets have writers that enjoy different types of music. So just because Loudwire doesn't seem like they're gonna like this grindcore band doesn't mean that there's not a guy that works there that is like the grindcore expert, like, you know, and he wants to cover. So, you know, you have to find those people and those publications. So just because it won't work in the big 5 or 6, you know, print magazines doesn't mean that you can't still build like a nice campaign for them and pinpoint like what's going to work. I don't know if we're still answering the question.
Like it would not be a Corey and Curtis podcast if we did not go off the rails at some point. So it's totally on brand right now.
I was listening to you.
But really kind of to follow up is we want to, you know, we're interested in these bands' careers. So if people doesn't connect on one album, hopefully they'll build up enough of a fan base from the radio airplay and press coverage and advertising and videos that they put out on the last album that at least the next time they put a record out, there's going to be that much more people that know who they are, and we'll give them a chance.
Thank you for bringing it back to the point. I was like,
And
I'm like,
see.
I know I'm like in another place right now. But I was saying I was listening to one of your previous episodes with Kevin Stewart Penko, who I obviously work with. If I didn't, that'd be bad because he's a metal publicist. And he like, how good are you that you don't know who that is? No, he's great. And I was listening to it and I was noticing that he was like kind of going off into these like different topics, but that were all very valid and interesting points. And so sometimes I'll just be like, this is a point that's tangentially related to this, and I think people can learn from it. So I'm going to keep talking. Yeah. So thanks for allowing us to do that, mostly.
No problem. So we got like 2 minutes left. So Corey's going to ask a final question of you guys, and then we're going to end off.
Okay.
It is the most important question of the interview. What is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh my God! What?
I told you this separates the amateurs right now. This is a deciding question.
Dinosaur, Velociraptor. Hands down.
Velociraptor is a classic. It is
I
a
have
classic.
so many like comedy answers that I'm not going to give right now.
Oh my God.
No. Man, you took Velociraptor.
Go with Stegosaurus.
No, I think I'm gonna go with T-Rex because they have tiny hands like me, but they're mighty.
Big
Good
head.
band too.
T-Rex, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm like, dinosaur, man, that's tough.
I know it's hard to choose because they're all really cool. Like
Yeah.
I just want one. I don't even really care what it is.
What if I had said like dinosaurs aren't real? Wasn't there somebody recently that went on record saying they didn't think dinosaurs were real?
No.
Probably.
I feel
Knowing
like
this
it.
world,
By the way,
yeah.
my second favorite dinosaur is Dinosaur Jr.
Perfect answer. Perfect
There you
answer.
go. There you go. Bram's good for those.
So do you guys, either of you guys have any final words before we wrap up? Any words of wisdom you want to impart?
No. Thanks for having us.
I say thanks for having us and thanks for letting us represent Napalm together. We both really enjoy working here, and it's a nice team atmosphere, and it's been nice being on the team. And yeah, that's why we wanted to come on together, because we're like, yeah, we can give you so much more of a well-rounded book. So thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. And with that, party on, Corey.
Party on, everybody.
See ya.
Party on.